Okay, so I was thinking about the collective trauma of the past, let's say 3 years. I think COVID's definitely a pretty clear change point in culture and society, and a big reason. Like, things get shaken up sometimes by historical events, and that was just the one. I mean, obviously, everyone knows that. But anyway, I was thinking about the collective trauma of the pandemic and things that are downstream from the pandemic, either downstream from literally just the virus, just making waves, just like surging through the human population multiple times of this deadly virus, disabling virus, and just the physical effects that come from that, but also the mental and emotional toll that comes from having to live in a pandemic, and the ways that probably, let's say, the forces that are like anti-vax, COVID's not a big deal, it's nothing worse than the flu, who are like that from the beginning, and at various points more and more people have kind of joined that idea and kind of abided by those beliefs. And a lot of that is just, it's a desperate desire for things to be normal and for things to be healed and things to be back to the way they were. And so the reason, like, right wing, reactionary, and also just general, like, I don't know, the weird, like, people call it populism. I don't know if that's populism, but just there is an avenue of anti government, anti vax, anti COVID, like, thought that is a lot more just like mainstream. Maybe people who weren't super politicized before this. There's things like the crunchy to alt right pipeline. So there's a lot of people who are like natural medicine and maybe more like lefty liberal type anti-vax or anti-science, and a lot of those people have just gone further and further right into kind of the same movement that QAnon resides in. And even if people don't say that they're in QAnon or aren't doing anything like that, that was such a surge of energy during 2016 onward, that it, like, it's those ideas and those thoughts have kind of like worked their ways into just mainstream society and mainstream ideas in a way that really troubles me. Anyway, back to where I'm getting. So I think a lot of the, let's say, just the deep energy within a lot of those movements comes from this desire for things to be normal, and like, just like, all these things that have happened suck, and it's 100% the fault of the government that just went crazy and wanted to control us and wanted to do overreach. And so it's funny because these people think that basically what the US response to COVID, they think that was like complete utter tyranny, which has always been so funny, because my viewpoint is like, we ain't done jack shit. And like, there was a big change in society and change in the way things went just because the virus is literally such a big impact. But in terms of like the US being authoritarian dictatorship, like, that, in my opinion, is not what happened at all. And honestly, public health institutions in this country are, even before, started out pretty weak and pretty at the whims of the fucking free market and just general like status quo. And so that's the reason America, in my estimation, did really poorly in responding to COVID. So anyway, talking about this a little bit again, but the collective trauma of the last years. And so it that it's like extra pain when there's a desire to normalize when there's still so much trauma in the air, because by necessity it means like not listening to and downplaying actual like things that people are dealing with. And so we're in this time where everyone's like trying to be normal, but there's no, but at the same time we're living with, like, I think it's like 1 million children, or maybe a couple 100,000 children, like either their primary caretaker or one of their parents like died of COVID. And it's obviously worse within different demographics. And yeah, there's just, everyone listening to this now, there's some fucking shit that's gone down in the last couple of years. And even though that's more on a micro scale, everything still connects to the macro whole pandemic world changing upside down, so many paradigms getting shifted, people changing up their work, or people who are working in service jobs like getting kicked out but getting unemployment insurance. But now we're 3 years later, and obviously all the supports have basically been taken away, but we're still dealing with the damage and so many things. And it's kind of, at least for me, it's really disorienting, and like living in this place with all this damage and all this hurt and all these things that people are still dealing with. But just things trying to be normal, and just like, don't think about COVID. Don't talk about like what went down the last couple of years. Just try and move on. And it's an impulse that I understand. And it's an impulse that is very much the way of a lot of like American culture. Cause that desire. Oh, okay. Here's the big old thought I was getting to. Gosh, this is long. But say that big response to a collective trauma is to downplay it and say it's not happening. Part of that is to want to live in this world where things are the same. And that does happen on an individual level. Like people's responses to trauma or abuse, or just like really hard things happening to them or someone close to them, like a very common response is to not think about it, to not talk about it. And I think it comes from similar places. So maybe it's the man who has trouble accessing his emotions, that just like doesn't want to talk about anything, or just like shoves it down and does that. Oh, and I also watched Shiny Happy People, I think it's called, the documentary on the Duggar family. And so it was like a look at this super high control, super far right fundamentalist Christians, the Quiverful movement, and the crap, now I can't remember the name of the guy. Well, he's evil anyway. But like the guy who really ran this like really influential Christian organization, and the way that like there was a lot of abuse and a lot of like trauma that happened within this, especially to a lot of the children and the people who apply these practices, because a lot of the like child rearing stuff is just super authoritarian, and it's super like mega patriarchy type stuff. Like the father is in charge of the wife, basically. We're talking that level. And in those same cultures, like when things go bad, they just don't get talked about, and they don't get responded to. And but they also, all these families, like the Duggars, were on TV for years and years. And that is because like they all seemed happy-go-lucky, like the kids were really obedient, and they were really like helping each other. And to an outside viewer, that's like what people crave. Like, oh my gosh, a family that just seems happy and loves each other and spends time with each other, that's great. But that's not the truth of the matter of what was going on at the house, and the issues that a lot of the children are dealing with, because that is just they were like performing to be good children. Like literally it gets beat into you what you need to do, what are the right things to do, and the right way to live. And in this family, that means like not even watching TV, or not even having a radio in the home. One of their relatives who lives a more worldly life literally had to call them to let them know if there was a tornado warning, because they didn't want a radio in the home. And Bill Gothard, that's the name of this guy. He's awful. I think he's maybe getting sued or something, I forget. But all because this Bill Gothard guy, like the ideas that he had were just like followed to a T, because he's the one talking to God. He's basically this weird American like fundamentalist pope. And turns out he's like a massive piece of shit. What do you know? So anyway, I was just thinking about that and relating to like the right-wing elements of responding to the collective trauma and the ways that they do. And like that's like a right-wing type church and teachings. And so I was thinking of the ways that collective trauma can kind of resonate with more micro, more personal traumas. And yeah, just thinking about the fact like so many people are struggling. There's still a lot of things going on and issues that people are dealing with. And I just hope that everyone can find peace and patience and safety and healing, because folks, we are going through it, and it's better to talk about it than pretend that we're not. So that's my thoughts. This went quite a long time. I'll see y'all later.